when I was a little kid, I was always into creative stuff. But when I came to an age where I came to know about gravity, about things falling down, I always had questions. I remember asking around, what is gravity? And the main answer which I got was, is what is responsible for things falling down on Earth. And when I could ask, like, how is that possible? How does that happen? They would say, well, just know that that's what happens. It's just there to make things fall down. So I came to the conclusion that perhaps, just like metals, they get attracted to magnets. Maybe there is some sort of a big magnet on the core of the planet Earth which attracts all of us, so we could stick to the planet Earth. Up until I came across Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, where he explained in detail what gravity is, where it came from. And from that point on, my mind was lit and I was hooked. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about what Einstein said, especially in what he wrote in the letter to Michaela Besso's widow. In the letter, he said, the only difference between the past, the present, and the future is a stubborn, persistent illusion. In other words, what he meant was the past is not gone, and the future already exists. The more I dug into this, I came into realization that the difference between the dead and the living is that the living live in space through time, and the dead live in time through space. I'm a visual artist, so how about I try to explain this through this painting? So with this artwork, I will be explaining to you about how space goes backwards and how we can connect different dimensions of space-time. Today is the day when I'm starting to do this painting. I have an idea of what I'm going to paint, even though I don't have specific details, but I know the overall idea of what I'm going to do. But here's the thing. You already know every detail what's going to come out of this painting. I don't know that detail. I know the overall picture. So I'm going to start painting. I believe from your point of view, you'll be following up on the details of how I'll be doing it. So let's go. Now, let's say before I started this painting, you gave me a couple of instructions on how I should paint it. Since you already saw it before, and you gave me some instructions, and right now you are pretty much asking yourself, like, what is happening there? That's not how this painting looks like at the end. Now, the fact that I screw this one up, does that mean the original painting that you saw in the beginning does not exist? I believe not. So this is one of those situations where it's the I knew you before you were born situation. You just have to give me the instructions and I have to live by those instructions. If I screw up, you're not the one to blame. I'm the one who's misused my degree of freedom. So from your point of view, the future of this painting already exists. It's a finished picture to you. You've seen it already, all right? But to me, it's in the future. I don't know what it is. So my duty in this case is just to make sure that I live up to that painting. So one other very important thing which is happening here is the issue of dimensions. From your dimension, you might be watching this from, I don't know when that might be, but it's after I've already done this. So in other words, from your point of view, you'll be looking into the past. From my point of view, I'm heading towards the future, and I don't know what's in the future. Now, think about this. What would happen if you could have a possibility of moving from your dimension into the future, whenever that will be, and being able to get into my dimension right now and tell me that, hey, you know what, that's not the right color. You know, I've seen the final picture. That's not what I saw there. Or maybe go change your shoes, put on some better shoes or something like that. That would mean you have achieved one thing. You've managed to go into the past. Because this moment in time is the past to you.
Now, at the same time, if you can manage to connect with my dimension, that would mean I also have access into the future. In other words, through you, I'll be looking into what it is that's going to come out of this in the future. So I could as well ask you, like, oh, hey, you saw the final picture. What did I do here? I'm still thinking right now, like, what am I going to do here? What am I going to put here? You already know what it is. Could you please tell me if in your real time you could be able to get into my real time, and I could also connect into your real time, even though this is happening at different times? That's time travel. And at the same time, something very important could be achieved there as well. That would mean we have conquered death. Because death basically is the difference in dimensions. The living live in space through time, and the dead live in time through space. The only difference is the dimension in between. So, in this painting, basically the blue is representing the space, and the red is representing the time. So, this is how I understand this. When Albert Einstein said, the living live in space through time. Remember, this represents time. So when we say someone is dead, basically it's like they've switched over to the other side of the dimensions. This is the dimension of time. So the dead live in time through space. Just to give you a clue, these lines here that you see, they represent the coordinates that are used in explaining about the space-time geometry. And these circles that you see here, they come in basically three colors, and in the squares here as well. They represent the quarks, the three flavors of the quarks. Overall, if you can have a very good look, you see that this is a clock. I took this idea from the sun clocks, the ones that were used a long time ago. So if you flip it over, the same sun goes to the other side, and you can tell time. The same sun goes to the other side, and it's pretty much the same.
There's an idea in physics about the extra dimensions in space. The idea was raised in efforts to try to find out about why gravity is way weaker than magnetism. However, experiments done at the Large Hadron Collider, they found that this idea was wrong. So, in my own opinion, I think there could be more we can do with this idea of special dimensions, besides just trying to explain the reason why gravity is weaker than electromagnetism. For example, what if extra dimensions can be used to explain about consciousness? Now, I know that sounds crazy, but just hear me out. Through Albert Einstein, we have come to know that space and matter cause gravity. The bigger the curvature of space, the stronger the gravity. What if maybe just 1% of the space that has been curved does not mix back with the rest of the space upon the leveling? This could mean every time space is curved, a new property of space is formed. This new form of space could coexist with the rest of the space, but its properties could slightly change compared to the normal space. Since the formation of this spatial property is directly linked to gravity, big masses like the stars and the black holes should be responsible for the formation of this form of space, permeating throughout the universe. We know that the effects of curvature of space on mass is gravity. So this could mean this new form of space has an effect on mass as well. That brings me to my second radical idea, which is about consciousness. I like to think of consciousness as something that is not in the particles in our brains, but rather in the field of space that is around us. This could mean all living things, including ourselves, we only have the ability to read this particular property of space and time. The masses of living things are related to space through gravity. At the same time, the relation of these same masses to this other new property of space, I would like to look at it like the relation is what we call consciousness. The same way as fluctuations of space affect masses,
fluctuations of this form of space should have an effect on consciousness as well. You must be asking how this idea could possibly be practical. So this is how I would like to look at the arrangement of this new property of space. The first thing is the intelligence in your brain. The second thing is this new property of space. And the third one is the general 3D space that we know. For example, right now I want to move my left hand. Before I even decide to move my left hand, my brain would have to connect with this new form of space, this property. Then it's going to have to link this with the 3D space which is around me. After that, my brain will have to give commands for the rest of my body to move in 3D. The question is how? Just like light, space must have some form of duality. One form is the one which we experience through gravity, and the other one is the one we use to read the spaces, as I like to call it, consciousness. This should make it possible to live in space through time and time through space. That ability for the brain to connect with the dimensions of space is my definition of consciousness. The inability of the brain to connect with the dimensions of space is also my definition of unconsciousness. From a biological point of view, unconsciousness is what happens when the brain doesn't receive enough blood supply. In other words, in the absence of blood, the brain doesn't receive the supplies needed, therefore it fails to perform its duties. And one of those duties is, in whatever way it could be, connecting to these dimensions. Is this idea experimentally measurable? This extra property of space would first have to be defined in order to measure the effects. Right now, my only definition is that it's a new form of space that is formed by gravity. My assumption is that its properties have an effect at quantum level in living things, because living things must have the ability to read it. Effects of this form of space must be measurable through the ability to connect with the dimensions in living things. For example, measuring the brain's ability to connect to dimensions in two different places, one in a place with normal gravity like on Earth, and the other in a place where there is weaker gravity, for example like at the International Space Station, or even at a place where the gravity is even stronger, like for example at Jupiter. But for now, I think the International Space Station would be best to measure this. My prediction is that both weaker and stronger gravity should affect the ability to read dimensions in living things. For example, at the International Space Station, the processing speed of dimensions, which I call consciousness, in our brains should either slow down or increase by a small fraction compared to the way the brain would function on a normal 1G surface. However, the increase or decrease in the brain to dimension connectivity shouldn't be confused with the loss of weight in mass due to weakness in gravity. You have no idea how many times I say to myself, what am I doing? The whole idea behind this artwork and the 4 more that are coming up is not to come here and say, oh hey, I just solved this world's biggest physics problem, but rather is to provide a platform where people who have ideas come forward and share their ideas using the artworks.
Remember, this is a 5 artwork series, so if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. Please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on the next presentations and artworks. Also, feel free to donate to this series. The details are below.